Friday, August 30th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This morning I want to talk about the day I realized that the monetary system was fraudulent, that we're going to continue to have crises, and it was like my Eureka moment. It was after I started buying gold and I had been reading about the system, about monetary history. I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about also a book called Dispatches from a Dying Country, Reflections on Modern England by Sean Gabb, and how it's related to the day that I realized the system was fraudulent. They're all interconnected in my case. And I also want to talk about a YouTube channel I recommend called Seething Frog. And the latest video by the guy who runs the channel is very interesting about how most of the stuff, or 99% of the stuff we hear, all the mainstream media stuff, even alternative media stuff, a lot of it are just distractions to divide and conquer us, and how we need to basically keep an eye on the ball for things like that I'm going to talk about briefly about on this book, and also what I always talk about, which is that the central banks, what they're doing is basically the people who run them, they're just extracting wealth from you, from the middle class, and it's getting worse and worse. And yeah, everything else, Brexit, suspension of parliament, trade wars with China, left-right paradigm, 2020 election, Epstein, or Epstein, if you want to call it like that. It's all distractions and a psyop, as Seething Frog says. So I recommend that channel. Some of you might know Seething Frog already, but for those who don't, I recommend Seething Frog. So let's get to the markets this morning, see where they are. It's a little earlier. It's 7:34 a.m. So it's not as busy right now. It'll probably get busier a little later on here in Europe. Yesterday was an interesting day again. When I did my video, I think the stock market was up 20 points, the Dow or so. And then just after that, I finished my video and uploading it. The market was up already 150. There's news about China and the trade war. And then the market kept going up and up. Finished up considerably yesterday, the stock market. We saw precious metals actually turn around and go back down quite relatively sharply. But if you look at last few months, we're still at very elevated levels. So, and as I've said many times, markets don't go up in a straight line and they don't go down in a straight line. There's always bumps on the road, on the way, or turns. Right now it's 7:35 a.m. London. Spot gold has rebounded a little bit. I think yesterday the low was just below 1520. The high was 1550. So quite a wide range, but we're going to continue to see wide ranges as things get more volatile. So we're at 1530.70 right now, up about $3. The range has been 1522 to 1533 overnight in spot gold. Silver is up 14 cents, outperforming here a little bit. It's at 1840. I think we got down to almost 18 yesterday, 1805 the spot price. So 1840 right now. Range has been 1806 to 1843. The Dow future is up 8.5 points, 26,359. So I want to show you a chart of the Dow trend line here. And you can see that yesterday's rally, the high was just on that trend line, and we're hugging that trend line right now. So to me, what that looks is like a flag or consolidation. You can see there. You've had the drop from the end of July, quite a sharp drop there, and now the market is taking a break, trying to determine whether it's going to keep going down, or it might even go back up even higher. Who knows? But that's where the stock market is right now in terms of technical picture, in my opinion. S&P right now unchanged, 29,372. NASDAQ 100 future down 7 points at 76.94. Sterling is at 121.80, so that's also unchanged. The euro is down 0.2% at 110.39. Dollar is down 0.15 versus the yen, Japanese yen, at 106.37. And the dollar is up 0.2% against the Chinese yuan at 716. WTI crude 56.14, down 0.75%. Brent is down 0.4% at 60.19. Crude oil doesn't seem to have much direction at the moment. It's just hovering around that 55 to 58 level, I would say, WTI. Bond market, yes, yields did back up, did go up yesterday a little bit with the good performance of stock market and the Chinese comments on trade that helped, specifically like tech companies. So right now the 10-year yield is at 1.51%. I think we were around 147 yesterday. The 2 years at 1.524. So the curve is slightly inverted, 1.5 basis point. Yesterday was about 4 basis point. So that's the US yield curve there. So why did I take out a 20 pound or 20 pound Bank of England note earlier in the video? Well, the day, it was like my Eureka moment. I realized, well, it is definitely screwed up. It was a couple of years after I started looking and had bought gold, looking into gold, monetary history, you know, with the internet. That was 2002. I had access to a lot of stuff. I started reading jsmindset.com, Jim Sinclair's site. I looked into GATA. I was reading all those things, all those websites. There are other websites like goldeagle.com that I used to read quite a bit. A lot of great articles. 321gold.com. But this day I was at work in the city. I worked for ABN AMRO Bank at the time. And I went out for lunch down Bishopsgate, if you know the city of London. And I went into Liverpool Street Station, bought some lunch. Then I was walking back and I was putting some change in my wallet and I saw this 20 pound note. And for some reason, I looked at it carefully because people, you know, they take a banknote or a dollar bill and they just pay it and they put it back in their wallet or in their pocket. They don't really look closely at what it says because they don't. But for some reason I saw here, Bank of England, and it says in small print here, very small. And this is one of the old notes. It's still not plastic like they do now. And it says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of 20 pounds. That's what it says there, right there, Bank of England. And it's signed by the chief cashier as well, right here. So technically it means that whoever's holding this could go to the chief cashier of the Bank of England and get paid. But the question is, get paid with what? So I did call the Bank of England. You know, you can call them, the press office, and I asked to speak to someone about the banknote. And I said, what do you get paid with when you come to the Bank of England? And they said, well, that just means that we'll give you a new banknote if the old one gets damaged. That's all. And I said, well, why don't you say that then? You can get a new banknote if this gets damaged. And they said, well, that's the way it's always been. And I know why they couldn't tell you the truth or couldn't tell me the truth? Well, it's because back before 1914, when all the banks in the UK suspended convertibility of the banknotes into gold, just at the outbreak of World War I, you could go to the Bank of England or you could go to any bank and get 20 sovereigns for this. I don't think they had a 20-pound note then. I think the biggest might have been a 5-pound note. So you could take a 5-pound note, one of the big ones. I've got one of those. I'll take it out one day. I didn't today. But then I realized, you know, this is a fraud. This is not going to end well. And it didn't, of course, right? A few years later, we had the '08 crisis and everything collapsed. So now, what about this book? What's it got to do with this banknote? Well, Sean Gabb, the author of this book, he's part of the Libertarian Alliance, which is the kind of the Libertarian Party in the UK. It's a very small party. And he wrote this book some years ago. So what does it say here? Dispatches from a Dying Country, Reflections on Modern England by Sean Gabb. And what's this got to do with Seething Frog? Well, because I think the same thing is happening here in the UK. We're losing our historic freedoms. Our money's been debased while people are not really looking at these important things. They're focusing on all the big distractions. So what does it say here? Dispatches from a Dying Country is an acerbic account of the gradual deconstruction of the essential liberal traditions of England, a country that the author argues and documents is moving even closer to a police state. England is becoming a nation of serfs under surveillance, harried for their own alleged good by governments and special interests that make use of assorted moral panics to establish their hegemony. See, distraction, moral panics. The alleged menace of religious cults, of drugs, drunk drivers, demonic gun owners, pedophiles, pornographers, and the specter of racism are just part of a plague of mythological and socially constructed pseudo-menaces that are used to engineer the legitimation of our rulers. There you go. Is exactly what Seething Frog was talking about. Dr. Gabb further exposes the sordid power lusts, tactics, and hypocrisies of what he terms the enemy class, the parasitic class of politicians, administrators, lawyers, experts, educators, media people, and state employees who are constructing their new order on a trumped-up basis of post-socialist corporatism and politically correct pieties. He's no less virulent, however, against what he calls the quisling right, the Tory politicians and their media cronies who posture as defenders of freedom, but who do nothing effective to defend it in practice. So this book was written in 2001. So now to why it's related to this. Well, I think I bought this book in 02 or 03. And then I found out that Sean Gabb was giving a speech, a talk in London, central London, in the evening. So when I left work, instead of going back home, I went to watch his talk. It was in the Mall, or the Americans who call it the Mall, really central London. There was a conference room they got there, like an auditorium. And he spoke, and interestingly as well, Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister now, was there. At the time, I don't think he was an MP. He was a writer or columnist for the Daily Telegraph, and he spoke as well, Boris Johnson. I don't really remember exactly what they spoke about. I mean, of course, he spoke about this, Sean Gabb, but not Boris Johnson. He spoke a bit about history, Romans, I think, I'm not sure. Good speaker, Boris Johnson, of course. So after the talk ended, people mingled around, talked to each other, and I happened to see Samuel Britton, who is a famous economist here in the UK, think he's probably retired now. And I went up to him and I started talking to him about this. And I asked him about what he thought about the fact that there's still this promise there to pay the bearer on demand, but there's nothing behind it. I asked him, don't you think that's a problem? And he looked at me, you know, and kind of dismissed it, right? He's a Keynesian, of course. So that's how this is related. So, and I remember these. Yeah, that was the day I realized that system was really screwed up. And it made me even more determined to warn people like colleagues, friends, family. I didn't have my YouTube channel at the time. Didn't even think about that. I was still working in the city, but and that's that's why I kept accumulating precious metals, gold and silver. So there you go. That was my Eureka moment when I saw, and it's hidden in plain sight, and it's still there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Twitter, Steemit, and on DTube. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.